What did the early M16s look like? Well, we've got one, a real one, minus of course a modern semi-auto receiver. Colt Armalite 604 from Century Arms. We'll take this thing apart and take a look at some of the differences, what has changed, and where it all began. Coming up next on GBGuns. During my visit to Century Arms in Vermont for an article in Tactical Life magazine, I got to be there for the opening of some crates, including one that had a bunch of 601s and 604s in it. Where they came from, how they got their hands on them, we don't know. But of course the lowers had to be destroyed because that was a machine gun. This is an aftermarket Nodak Spud lower receiver that I picked up for about 90 bucks. Authentic, missing the gate there, and very simple. But the rest of it, everything else, all of the internals, everything else on this gun came from Century as a parts kit for a 601. I think this is actually a 604. The 601 being the earliest, the 604 being when they went into early mass production for the Air Force. But it's an example of where the AR started, and there's so many neat little things that are different from what you might be seeing on your AR these days. I'm going to separate the upper and lower so we can take a look at some of these parts. I want to start things off with the lower receiver because it had some things that were interesting and a surprise to me. This is an original. Down there underneath the sticker it says Colt 20 round magazine. And you notice it's got the waffle pattern for reinforcements that was later dropped. These things are extremely rare. I hope this one still functions. The follower at some point I think was updated. It's not tilting at all, and I know even my M16 mags in the Army tilted, but interesting shape to it. You can see that the dents go all the way up to the top. That's to help reinforce the feed lips. These feed lips, however, don't look so happy. So this magazine obviously has been through some wear. You can tell most of the finish has gone off of it, but no rust and lightweight, which leads me to believe it is aluminum. Of course, I could just stick a magnet to it. The takedown pins, you can see you've got a small little divot spot in there to drive a pin punch through if you needed to. Even on the front, and the front is not captive. Instead, it has the detent little spring load here, and it does not stick out far enough to easily push through, making it truly a pivot pin, not takedown pin. I mean, we call these things two different things. Takedown being the rear, pivot being in the front, because you don't need to pop this one. Then I guess as a feature of that, or part of keeping the gun slim, who knows why it was designed this way, it sits flush to the receiver. So you've got to have something and intentionally drive that out. The material from the upper receiver holds it in place, and then of course that detent catches again on the back. The guts are all from the original, which means that it will flip all the way around because it's a full auto safety selector. It does not, however, continue to fire on full auto. You get one click and that's it. But you notice the magazine release is not fenced at all. Sticks out wide, could be bumped. That's probably why the fencing came to be later on. That's that raised portion around here on your modern receiver. Also, the bolt catch and release. To intentionally lock the bolt open, you've got to have very intentional movement. You can see how that rests so deeply in there. There's no bumping that on accident. You got to almost have a fingernail to push in there. And the ping pong paddle style for the release. The selector has that hole through the middle of it. That's original. The grip itself has a little bit of a swell. It seems like it swells towards the top. If I put it at this angle, without getting in the way of the camera there, you can see it's thicker through here and then narrows down. Not quite as flat feeling as the stuff I had in the Army or your modern GI style. Don't know if it's just the material making that feel more pronounced or if it's a difference. The buttstock, no trapdoor for your cleaning supplies, so no empty space in there. They're made of fiberglass, which has an interesting feel to it. And one thing that I thought was pretty neat is this spring guide, not buffer. Get this out of here. This was original and may or may not be completely in working condition, but it's grabbed on here pretty well. There we go. So this rifle length, and it's hollow. There is a pin there that has, I don't know, been sheared off over time or not, and these two spacers that slide in. And it sure looks to me, and I'm sure some of the AR nerds can verify that that pin is supposed to hold that on there. But interesting multi-piece design with those guides in there. It's very lightweight. Doesn't seem to have any weight absorbing function, you know, a recoil absorbing function that a heavier buffer would provide. But the action on this thing, which I will demonstrate when I get it all back together, is incredibly smooth. Let's take a look at the upper. Now, from the internet lore that I've read, one thing that I thought was interesting is that when Colt took the contract, they did not have barrel producing abilities. And so these barrels are rumored to have been made by Winchester with a 1 in 12 point something twist, often just referred to as 1 in 12. Notice the profile quite different. And we've got a 3-prong flash hider. This is more evidence of it being very early. The closed tips, like you see on a modern flash hider, came about officially because troops would get things snagged in here. Unofficially because, and I very well believe it, troops would use these tongs to try to pry on things and then end up bending the tongs of it. If I get one half of the handguard off to show you, it's done by pulling back on a ring, which I will show the camera. Pull back on this ring here, and you can see this is all quite dirty, and it looks like we might have somewhat of a gas leak up here from some of the extra carbon and soot that is on the leading edge of the heat shield. We can see the heat shield design, and it remains open on the top and at the front on the bottom. Triangular handguard, single simple bend point in the gas tube. That's also indicative of the early ones from what I can see. Before I forget, I'll show you the relieved up marker for adjusting the front sight post. That's different from later years. And then of course we've got our C in a square right on there that lets you know it was Colt. It's a Colt Armalite production. Pull the charging handle out, and that's your charging handle. Little tiny triangle. It was later abandoned because, well, it's so low profile that it can be hard to grab and easy to slip off of. Our rear sight adjustment is done here. We've got an R marking on there and a detent. You push in on this detent to turn it. And we've got 2 different apertures. Very, very simple. I tell you, this is a very lightweight rifle. The bolt carrier, chromed, as was correct. This thing's in such great shape, I wonder if it's original or not. But as far as I can tell, I don't have any reason to believe that it's not. You can see we don't have any forward assist markings because obviously this upper does not have a forward assist. And it does have the original firing pin, which is a design moved away from for safety reasons. Look at this bulbous thing and then take a look at the one in your AR, and you can see there's a lot of extra mass here, and that causes potential for slam firing because as the bolt goes forward and hits home, the weight in here makes it still want to continue. But you can see this thing is really thick and beefy back end. Our cam pin, well worn. Ironically, not much worse than what I've seen on ARs that only have a few hundred rounds through. And find that to be partially amusing because, of course, the AR-601s and 604s were for the Air Force, and Air Force isn't exactly known for using rifles very often. So that might be why this is in such good shape, or more likely this at some point had been upgraded or updated. We can see the staking on our gas key there, single stakes in the center. That is also period correct. And taking a look at our extractor, we have a single spring, no buffer or bumper inside or outside, which is also period correct. Bit of wear on there. The feed ramps, which unfortunately I can't get the camera at an angle to show you very well, are of course not M4 feed ramps, because that didn't come until much later, but they appear to have been worn into that condition, which is kind of funny that you know, put enough rounds through there and eventually something will polish its way through. Get this back together. Everything reassembles just as you'd expect, like the current AR, but all has a very different feel to it, and man, it's amazing when you strip all the extra junk off of rifles that we put on these days, how lightweight the system really is. Of course, not having a forward assist helps chop quite a bit of weight off. Get this upper and lower remated and show you what I'm talking about as far as smoothness of the action. So with those together, and hopefully the microphone will pick up well. Hoping you're hearing that. What I'm listening to is how smooth things are back here. Through there, it just glides. And of course you get that ping sound from the flash hider. Which could be expected. That was totally off camera, it doesn't matter. It's that ringing sound, which I fully expect to hear when firing. Neat piece of history. The barrel didn't look too bad. These things are incredibly hard to find and are not inexpensive as a result. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do this off camera. That's too awkward. But I just wanted to give you a peek at it and let you see it uncleaned. Just, it showed up in surplus. They chopped the receiver. All I got from the original receiver was about that much of it, just the tail and the parts that go in there. But it's kind of cool to look at and see an AR essentially stripped down to just what it needs to be, right? None of the changes that even the dust cover shape is a little bit different on this protrusion here. None of the excess or after 10,000 rounds you need to do this changes that became commonplace and now are just what you see on a standard AR. This is bare bones, just what you need to operate operationally in operations, of course. I'm curious to get this out to the range. One, see how well zeroed it is or isn't. Two, to see what it's going to do with modern ammunition, because that 1 in 12 twist, as we saw with the Brownells reproduction 601, doesn't like heavier bullets, which are all the rage in today's shooting fashion. So that can be tricky, and then also just the conditions of this. It obviously went through some heat cycles. There's a little bit of surface rust discoloration on there, but otherwise looks to be in good shape. Handguards are authentic. Everything is about as authentic as it gets. You can even see some of the fiberglass strands in some areas, but this was not an early green one, not a 601. This one was deliberately black, which I'm okay with. Black is what I learned on, and the AR is known as America's Black Rifle. This is a very early one. From what I can tell and what I know of the original serial number, this was produced in 63 or 64. I can't wait to get it out to the range. Just wanted to show you guys kind of close up so that when you watch the range footage, you have an idea of what this thing looks like and what we're shooting from. Thanks for watching.